I'm here with Paul. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
So you are, I could just see your CVM t-shirt just poking up above the bottom. You are Paul and you are part of CVM. Let's just go to what is CVM before we go anywhere else. What's CVM all about?
Yeah, Christian Vision for Men is a national movement with a desire to see 1 million UK men come to Christ.
Wow.
Because if we achieve that, then we'll change society. And I don't think I need to tell anybody that society needs to change. So that's what we do. Please call me Gasky, which is my surname with a Y on. I'm not used to being called Paul, so if you call me Paul and I just look glaze, it's because nobody calls me Paul. So please call me Gasky.
I will do. Is it Paul if you're in trouble? Because I'm like, if my wife wants to talk to me, it's Andrew. Very rarely.
It's Paul, and as you can imagine, some other things as well.
Yes. Colourful descriptions our wives use. Okay, so what do you actually do with CVM? Because I know of you a little bit. We've chatted a little bit. I know you were at the gathering, but what is it you're doing, kind of on a week-to-week basis with Christian Vision for Men?
Yeah, my role is, and it sounds really grand. It is regional director for England North, and technically my patch starts at Milton Keynes, which is in the north, don't you know?
It's north of somewhere.
Yeah, and I work with church groups from across the denominations to train and encourage and equip and resource men to look their mate in the eye and tell him about his Saviour. That's my basic role. Although I do have a geographical boundary, but to be honest, I'll go wherever I'm asked. I'll go anywhere. So I've got pretty much free reign to go anywhere.
Cool. I like that thing about looking your mate in the eye and telling him about Jesus, because for me, it's the most natural thing in the world to say I love Jesus Christ, but that's not necessarily natural for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely not. No, and again, there's this misconception, and it's one that I'm ashamed to say I had of Christian men and church men being needy and weak and odd, although some of us are, I suppose. But there's that notion that Christian men are just a bit out there, and it's sort of breaking those barriers down and being countercultural, because culturally it's not really cool to express what you believe, particularly when it comes to Jesus. We're going to talk about Jesus, so it's about getting alongside men and introducing those fellas to Jesus.
Thing is about you look at the Bible, you look at the life of Jesus, whether you know him or not, whether you are a fan of Christianity or not. If you look at Scripture, if you look at the Bible, you look at what Jesus did, his day to day. He went where, using the language of today, you needed to be a pretty decent man to go because nobody else would. You needed to have a little bit of something in you because he would go and chat with the prostitutes. Doing that takes just a bit of confidence. The classic one, he turned the tables over in the temple, therefore I can be angry. Well, not exactly. But even the turning over the tables, they were not little aluminium trestles in your camping shop. These would have been big, solid things that he chucked over. So there's a lot in that of that's pretty manly stuff that he did.
Yeah, and I think the only way I can describe it is my working career as a police officer has taught me one or two things about men, and if I could just summarise it by saying I've spent all my working life to a degree in the gutter, and now I am still in the gutter, but pulling other fellas out, if that makes sense, and showing them there is another way.
I love that. I love that idea of helping guys. That's what Jesus did. Even speaking to women. I mean, we don't comprehend in the West in 2024 what that actually entailed. But
Yeah.
for a Jewish man to speak to an outcast Jewish woman, it is so far beyond our comprehension of the social norms that he broke in order to do that, which I think is one of the most manly acts he ever did.
Yeah.
But in our modern world, we don't necessarily fully understand what that actually symbolized.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, because I work for a gender specific ministry. I think it's really important to get across that we don't advocate a man only church. Far from it. And to quote my wife Sue will say that every Christian woman would want her man to be in a relationship with Jesus, and every Christian man with a daughter or daughters would want them to meet a man who is in a relationship with Jesus. So let's get that one out of the way. We don't advocate a man-only church. We honour our ladies. I do honour female church leaders, and all that. So let's put that one to bed.
Cool. Right. Let's go back in a bit in time. So you said you were in the police. Just give us an overview. I mean, you said you were working in the gutter. Now you're pulling guys out of it. What was working in the gutter like for you in the police?
Well, I joined the Leicestershire Police in 1981, in the dark ages, and I was 21 years old at the time. And I didn't spend a great deal of time in uniform. I quickly got into a plain clothes role, and I had sort of a reputation for being a bit of a thief taker. They do say it takes one to catch one, so we'll leave that one there for the time being. But the ensuing 30-year career, I pretty much did sort of every sort of specialist role in the crime arena. So it came under the umbrella of the CID, so the Criminal Investigation Department. But during that time, I spent time working in the Vice Squad. I worked in crime intelligence, which is quite comical, really. I worked in a unit called the Sex and Dangerous Offenders Unit. So the acronym of that was SADO. So I was a SADO for 10 years. I then sort of progressed and went to work in anti-corruption. So I investigated my colleagues, which probably explains why I don't seem to have many friends. And upon retirement, I thought, right, now's the time to probably play golf again, because I used to play a lot of golf once upon a time before we had children. And I thought, well, perhaps I can take up a bit of lunchtime drinking, or perhaps I can catch up on those decorating jobs that I told my wife I would do one day. But as I always say to fellas, I say to Sue, my wife, look, you never rush a craftsman. So you can have that one for free. Use it. Let me know how you get on. So upon retirement, that was in 2011, so 30 years as a warranted police officer. Upon retirement, I went back to work for the Leicestershire Police in a civilian capacity, and I did that for 4.5 years until retiring for a second time in 2015 to really focus on what I believe was my call from God to fish for men, with the best boat, I think, being with Christian Vision for Men.
Fabulous. I love that. There's so much colour in there, which is brilliant. I love that you're constantly referencing your wife as well with those 5-minute jobs. They do take 5 minutes. It's just not necessarily when the 5 minute begins. That's what I always say. Okay, well, let's go back a bit further in time then. You're talking about his relationship with God. Where did that come from? What's your upbringing? How did you encounter church? How did you encounter Jesus Christ, so that now your whole time is spent trying to introduce people to this same man that you met?
Yeah, well, I had no faith upbringing. I'm the youngest of three. And as a kid, I was shipped out to Sunday school. But I think for a lot of kids in the 60s, it was the norm probably to get the kids out of the way rather than introduce them to their Saviour. And so I was shipped out to Sunday school. And to be honest, I don't really remember much from those sessions. I I mean, I did go to church occasionally, but if I'm honest, being the mercenary person I was, or probably still am to a degree, I used to sing in the choir, and I sang in the choir, and my motivation was because I got paid. So you got threepence old money for a choir practice, and sixpence or a tanner for a service, and double that for a wedding, which was a good earner. But so that was the reason I went, and as I got older, I was a pretty average kid. Went through the educational system. My big passion in life was playing football, and that sort of dominated my sort of early teenage years. And I was picked to represent Leicester City youth team, and I played alongside somebody you may have heard of called Gary Lineker.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Gary made the grade where Paul Gask didn't. Not only was I not good enough, but my interest in sport was quickly replaced by alcohol, women, and tobacco. Not necessarily in that order, but I sort of drifted into other things, and I let my what bit of sporting prowess I had, I let that sort of wane and drift away. So I joined the Leicestershire Police, as I say, in 1981, and I think I was as far away from any faith and church and all that. I was far away as anybody could be, really. And when I did go to church for the mandatory baptisms, weddings, and funerals, I just found it completely alien. It had absolutely no relevance to my life, because here I was in the roughy-tufty world of policing, and 8 hours before going into a church service, somebody was trying to kill me in the city centre. So I just found church irrelevant. They sang songs about loving another fella, which I really struggled with. There was lots of old people, lots of pictures drawn by children, lots of flowers, lots of tapestries. And in the Anglican tradition, the chap running the service wore what I perceived to be something akin to a dress. So it had no relevance to me. And men in church, I just thought they were, like I said earlier, weak and needy and needed a crutch. And throughout my life, I just thought they'll judge anyway, because everybody judges everybody else. So, and if I showed the remotest interest in any of this, would the church try and change me into becoming somebody I'm not? And because I thought I saw church as full of these nice men, and I'm not a nice man. And I thought, well, will the church try and turn me into something that I'm not? So it was not on my agenda at all. I was far away from it, and it was just irrelevant.
So how did you get from there? Church doesn't matter to now a relationship with Jesus does.
Yeah, there's quite an involved story. My wife came to faith in 1995, and I distinctly remember the night she came home from. She used to go to an event at De Montfort Hall in the city centre of Leicester. It used to be an annual Christian praise event, and Sue went on the back of going to church when our daughters were small. She used to go to the church like toddler groups just for something to do, basically. And through that, she occasionally went to church, and she went to this event because she'd promised to take another member of the church. She promised to give him a lift, and that was it. But she came home from that, and she told me that she'd given her life to Jesus. And at that time, I was going through a pretty tough time at work. And so I made it quite plain that I sort of was no fan of her newfound faith and her church and her new friends. So I made it my goal, and I'm really ashamed about this, but I made it my goal to probably use as much Anglo-Saxon as I could muster in order to express how I felt about her friends. And in fact, I had a reputation of being known as the man who occasionally speaks between swearing, which is not a real badge that I really want to wear. But at the time, it was just a bit of sport, and it was great to try and sort of rev them up and wind them up. But in the early to mid 1990s, as I said earlier, I was in the CID, and Leicestershire as a county, we were, and I use the word unfortunate, it's not perhaps the right word to use, but as a police service, we were unfortunate enough to have a number of murder inquiries which seemed to happen back to back. So you'd work on a murder inquiry, then you'd deal with it, and then another one would happen. And in those days, it was the policy to get a team of detectives from around the county to form the incident room to deal with whatever inquiry it was. And every time this happened, I was crewed up with a guy. I'm going to call him John. That's not his proper name. I'll call him John. But I was crewed up with a guy called John, and we were really good mates. I mean, times have changed, but in those days there was a big drinking culture in the CID to a degree, and I've worked with people of great honesty and integrity. But I can only speak about myself. But I considered myself to be above the law to a certain degree. So, it's not big and it's not clever, but I regularly had a few beers and drove. The uniform department of the police didn't really have any worry for me. And, I just wanted to be the best detective in the office. So that became my drive. So I could... that became my focus, and I wanted to be the best. So I had the best personal detection rate, the most number of arrests, the most number of informants, and I wanted to be the top banana. And I thought, I'd arrived. But my relationship with John was such that the banter we had, and when you're working with somebody for 12, 14, 16 hours a day, you like that, he says, crossing his little fingers, and you really get to know each other, or so I thought. But we were so busy, and John's police station was about 12 miles from where I was based. But like I say, we were pulled together to form these incident rooms, and we were that busy, and this is not funny, but it is a comment we made. We said, look, the next murder inquiry we get, we'll drag the body just outside of Leicestershire so they can deal with it and not us, which is not funny, but you can imagine that sort of, those comments got you through the day. But I went to work one Saturday morning in 1995. So my wife's got a newfound faith. I'm not very happy about that. And I go to work on the Saturday morning, as I say, my detective inspector called me in the office and he said, look, Gasky, you better sit down. I said, why? He said, well, there's no easy way to tell you, but last night John took his own life.
Wow.
And he actually took his own life 100 yards across the border into Warwickshire. And so our sort of puerile comment had come to fruition. And I was the only one who knew that. And it triggered something in me, which took me to a really dark place. And I sort of questioned myself, why didn't John say something? Because we were like that. Why didn't he say something? And then I thought, well, did he say something? And I wasn't listening, and I hadn't picked up on it, and I couldn't cope with how I felt. Couldn't cope with the grief, and back in the day, there wasn't a great deal of sort of outside support. It has changed, thankfully, but there was no counselling, no sort of real welfare stuff. The answer to everything was, come on, let's go and have a beer. We'll be all right and we'll crack on. And that was the sort of general culture and attitude. But for me, it manifested itself into rage and anger. I felt really angry, and I got nowhere to take this anger. And to be honest, and looking back, I was, the top detective, the Charlie Bananas in the office, and yet I felt like a frightened little boy, and I wanted to run away. And that's how I felt. But of course, there was no room for any weakness in the profession that I had. If you showed any sign of weakness, it got taken advantage of, and your reputation was gone. So I tried to hide that, although I couldn't cope with how I felt, as I say, and I had really problems sleeping. I couldn't sleep due to anxiety and everything else. So I tried to induce sleep any way I could. And if that involved drinking copious quantities of alcohol, that's what I did. How I kept my job, I really don't know. But, I had this mask and I had this persona of being the top banana in the office. And yet my life was falling to pieces. So I decided that I didn't want to be married anymore. So I wanted to run away, as I say. So I told Sue that I was leaving, and bless her, the night I told her, she was going to take our girls, who were then 9 and 7. She was going to take them to a pantomime, because if I'm honest, although I was a father in that I provided, when it came to being a dad, I wasn't. Didn't go to any school plays and parents' evenings, stuff like that. My focus was on the job. That was it, to the detriment of that part of me being a dad. So obviously Sue had seen her husband sort of begin to spiral downwards, and she'd confided in some of her church friends, including the local vicar, that my husband's in a bit of a mess, and we need to sort of get around him and pray, and etc., etc., etc. So the vicar, little bloke, 4 foot, I'll say he's 4 foot on a fag paper, little fella, giant of a man in my eyes. He turned out to be, and I'll always be grateful to him. But at that time, Sue said to him, because he said, "I'll go round and I'll go and speak to your husband." Sue said, "Well, the time's not right because he's likely to assault you," because that's where I was. I was really angry, and I'm ashamed to say I've had a couple of punch-ups in police stations with other police officers. That's where I was. I was just angry. So the night I announced I'm going, Sue still took the girls to the pantomime because she'd promised them. But on the way out, she popped into the vicarage and said, "Now's the time." So there I am, filling my car with my worldly possessions. And this little clergyman turns up. And I thought, "You're all I need. You're all I need." And I couldn't get rid of him. He just wouldn't go away. Despite me using as much Anglo-Saxon as I could muster, and some words that I probably made up anyway, he wouldn't go away. But eventually I said to him, I said, "Look, Tony, when I'm sorted out, I'll come and see you." And he said, "Right, now you've said that, you've got to, because if I said to you, I'll come and speak to you, and I didn't, you'd call me a hypocrite. I said, yeah, I would. Yeah, I would. He said, so you've got to come and see me. I said, yeah, I will. And off he went. Thought, great, got rid of him. I had no intentions of seeing him, ever. Just wanted him out of the way. But I left my marital home. I walked away from my marriage and my girls, and I got nowhere to go. So I sofa surfed. I occasionally slept in my car, slept in the office, slept in the cell block, would you believe, at the police station now and again. I just got nowhere to go. And I felt wretched. I just felt wretched. And because I couldn't sleep, and despite my best efforts to induce sleep, that didn't seem to work either. So I sort of dabbled in substances you don't buy across the counter at Boots. And I came to the conclusion after 2 or 3 months, I came to the conclusion that perhaps the world would be a better place if Paul Gask wasn't in it anymore. And because, like I say, I couldn't sleep, but I came to the conclusion, if I'm permanently asleep, then I won't be in any more pain. And it was as simple as that. So my attitude was very much blinkered, because people said to me, you know, well, you got family, you've got this, you've got that, you've got the other. The only person I was focused on and interested in was me, how I felt. So I made the decision to take my own life. Now, I didn't tell anybody and I didn't leave any notes. I just decided that was it. So on New Year's Eve, going into 1996, I decided that I would end my life, and I decided to jump from a railway bridge in the centre of Leicester. And the reason I chose to do that, because I'm terrified of heights, would you believe? I'm absolutely terrified of heights. But I knew if I jumped that I would do an instant proper job. Because I'm a bit of a coward, really, and didn't want to feel any pain. So I knew I'd do a proper job, because obviously I've seen people who jump. So that's what I decided to do. And it was ironic, really, because it's New Year's Eve and people are partying and having a good time, and I just felt really wretched. So I climbed onto the bridge, onto the wall of this bridge, and I was one step from going over. And then this inner voice, which I did write off as conscience, this inner voice said, look, don't do this. Just remember how angry you were when John took his own life. So don't do it. And it didn't so much as bring me back to my senses, but it made me get off the wall. And I wandered around for 3 days, would you believe? I just wandered around and I just thought, well, I've got nothing. I've got no future, nothing. So I found myself at the door of our local vicarage. Yeah. And Tony let me in, and I couldn't talk to him for an hour. I was just too upset, and proper upset, proper crying. And he said to me eventually, what are your plans? I said, I haven't got any. I said, I didn't even plan to be alive. So he said, well, do you want to go home? And I said, well, how can I go home? Because I've put Sue and the girls through hell. I mean, I'd started divorce proceedings and everything else. And I've put her through hell. And I've done some dreadful things. Dreadful things. So I can't. And he said, well, we'll see what happens. Now, unbeknown to me, when I left, Sue had dreamt that I was working for a Christian organisation. She dreamt that I was singing in a Christian rock band, and I've done a little bit of that as well. There's a couple of CDs floating around in the ether somewhere of yours truly singing. And she dreamt that I was preaching in church and all that. And she felt prompted to read a passage. I think it's from 2 Corinthians. I'm no theologian, but it's a passage, I think it's 2 Corinthians, which talks about questions about marriage. And in the Message version, which she felt prompted to read, it said, and I'll have to paraphrase, it said, if your unbelieving husband leaves, let him leave in peace. You never know, wife, how you handle this might not only bring him back to you, but bring him back to me. Oh. And she clung on to that. And she was saying to people, no, he's going to come back and he's going to be a man of God. And they were, with the greatest of respect to some people from church, they were basically saying, get rid of him. And I understand that. But so I turn up at my marital home holding the hand of this little clergyman because I wasn't man enough to go on my own. And Sue allowed us in. And I told her that I'd contemplated ending my life. So she's straight on the phone to our GP. Our GP is a member of our church. So you see where this is going.
Yeah.
So I'm dispatched to see the doctor. And he said you need an urgent mental health assessment. So he said it's that serious. He said to Sue, if you can't take him, then I'm going to get an ambulance because he's in serious need. So I'm poured into the car and off I go to hospital. And the mental health unit that I was assessed at is no longer there. It's closed now. But I said to Sue on the way, if they try to admit me, then I'm going to kick off. So I'm going to kick off big style. And Sue saying, well, because that's where I was just angry. And Sue said, well, we'll worry about that if we have to. So the hospital mental health unit, it was down a really long corridor, which had like a polytunnel, and it was right at the other end. And I distinctly remember entering that sort of corridor, and I'm sort of pumped up, ready to really go. And a door opened to my left, and this fella appeared, and he was enormous, member of staff. He was massive. And I looked at him and I thought, well, if I go in with as much violence as I can, I might be able to, that's what I thought. And a door to my right, opposite this door, opened, and I think it was this bloke's twin brother. He was massive. And I thought, flipping heck. And then 2 more doors opened and 2 equally big fellas appeared. And I just thought, this is not one you're going to win. So I went down to this unit and I spent some considerable time with a specialist. And I was diagnosed with suffering from severe depression and what would now be recognised as well as PTSD. It didn't really exist back then. We weren't really aware of that. So I wasn't admitted. I was prescribed some medication, and Sue was instructed, don't leave him on his own because it's going to take 2 weeks for the medication to kick in. Mm. And initially they gave me diazepam for the first few days, which completely sort of took me out. I was spaced out for 3 or 4 days. But Sue never did leave me alone, which is embarrassing when you want to go to the toilet, because she didn't leave me alone at all. So in human terms, Sue is the hero in my story, although there was several bombshells yet to deal with, because my psychiatrist, who I saw regularly for a year, would you believe, my psychiatrist said to me, if you want to save your marriage, you've got to be 100% honest with your wife. And I thought, I can't tell her. I can't tell her about an affair I'd had, which really, I'm not trying to minimalise that. But again, it wasn't the answer to everything. I just wanted to run away, as I say. But I thought, I can't tell her about that. I can't tell her why we're £15,000 in debt, because most of that had gone up my nose. How can I tell her stuff like that? But I knew I had to. And the best bit of theology I've ever heard, and this is not biblical, by the way, but it's the best bit of theology I've ever heard, and you'll have to forgive the vernacular, but it is, a good confession is like a good puke. It makes heck of a mess, but it's better out. James in the Bible puts it a bit better than that, but I think you know where I'm coming from. So I sat Sue down and I said, look, I need to tell you this. And it all came out. But praise God, she allowed me back into her life. So there I am. I'm on the sick from work. Everybody knows Gasky's gone mad, because that's what they said. You know, he's gone mad. And I've got lots and lots and lots of brownie points to earn, because I've made all these revelations to my wife. So I've got lots to claw back. So, like I say, I'm on the sick, and she said to me, we're having a bring and share evening at the vicarage. Will you come? And I thought, oh no, please, no, not with all those do-gooders, and oh no, and all those people who are going to judge and point a finger. Oh no, please no. But I had no choice. I had no choice. But I said to her, I said, look, I'll come, but the first bloke who says something, I'm going to take him outside, vicarage or no vicarage, and I'm going to give him a bit of a slap. And Sue said that nobody will judge. I said, they will, because that's just the way it is. So anyway, we turned up at the vicarage under duress, and I spent the next 2 to 3 hours with a bunch of churchmen, because we're in the kitchen, of course, because you'll always find me in the kitchen at parties. Anyway, I won't do another one like that, promise. But in those 2 to 3 hours, I realised that these blokes I thought were weak and needy were really some of the strongest men I'd ever met. So we went home and went to bed, and I had some pleasant thoughts for a change, because I'd had a really nice evening with these fellas. So I fell asleep, and then I had what I can only describe as my worst nightmare ever. Now, I'm not easily intimidated, as you can see by my good looks. I'm not easily intimidated. I've been around a bit, but I had a nightmare which was the most frightening experience in my life. And in my nightmare, I was being pulled between two forces. And on one side, it was just black, nothing. There was nothing there. And on the other side, there was a tiny speck of light. And I was being pulled between the two to such an extent that I really believed I was going to be torn in half. And I wasn't really bothered which side was going to win. I just wanted to be let go. And unbeknown to me, Sue was praying over me. She could see something weird is happening here, because I was thrashing about and screaming out in bed. And Sue's praying over me. And after this titanic internal battle, I was released by the darkness, just let go of me. And I was propelled towards this light, which got bigger and bigger and bigger. And the only way I can describe it is it was like the velocity of a cork coming out of a champagne bottle. And I was propelled towards this light and then released into a pure, blinding light, a real pure light. And I woke up and I sat up in bed confused. I was wet through with sweat, and I was trying to work out what I'd just experienced. So Sue decides perhaps now is the time to fetch a copy of the Why Jesus booklet that she'd hidden in her sewing basket downstairs. So she's out of the bedroom. And as soon as she walked out, I became aware of another presence in our room. And in the corner, in the gloom in our bedroom, a figure held out his hands towards me and said, "Paul, just trust me." And I knew it was Jesus. I just knew it was Jesus. Now, you think being a former police officer, I'll be able to give you a better description. You know, he's about 5'10", he's got a bit of a beard, and I can't. And it's not a cop out, excuse the pun. But the only way I can sort of summarise him is pure peace, a pure peace that I'd never experienced before. So at 1:10 a.m. on Sunday, the 3rd of March, 1996, my life was transformed by an encounter with the risen Lord Jesus Christ, and that set me off on the journey that I've been on ever since. But of course, it didn't come without its difficulties, because I've never read anywhere in the Bible where it says, you know, your life's going to be sorted. If only, far from it. But of course, I had to go back to work, and which was really interesting. So I go back to the CID after I've been off for over 4 months, and I walked in. And to be fair, I could have been a bit more subtle. I mean, I'm no shrinking violet, as you've probably worked out. But I walked into our office, and I just announced to the whole CID office, gentlemen, whilst I've been off, I've met the risen Lord Jesus Christ. And they went, Gasky, since you've been off with a mental health problem, we're not quite sure you should be back. And of course, they took the mick. And I went in one day, just to give you an example. I went in one day, my desk was covered in a purple cloth with a candle on each corner, like some sort of altar. And we had a tannoy system that was audible in our car park. And I parked my car one morning to be greeted by about 1,000 decibels of onward Christian soldiers. So they took the mick. And of course, they tried to explain it away. Some said that I made it up to save my marriage. But at that time, if I'm honest, then my marriage didn't really mean a lot to me, if I'm honest. So there was, but I understand why they would explain it away. Some said I was hallucinating. All I can say to that is I'd never hallucinated before or indeed since, but I get why they would say it. Some said it was as a result of the medication I was on, but it never said anywhere on my prescription that a likely side effect was a visit from Christ. Didn't say that, but I get why they would say it. And some said that we had a burglar in our house. Well, not only was nothing stolen, but I take it from me, had my house had an intruder, then he wouldn't have got out alive. That is a fact. So, but I get why they would try and explain it away. But all I said to them was, the proof's in the pudding, like everything, and you will see a completely different Paul Gask. And my journey with Christ started. In fact, I ended up leaving the CID for a while, which is a story on its own. How God was in that, and if I have time, I'll tell you, of course. But I left the CID quite early on, and because I didn't want to go back to that sort of culture and environment, I didn't want to do it. Despite people saying, "But you're the best detective we've got," and I said, "Well, I don't want to do it anymore." And a senior officer in the CID said to me, he said, "I've got blokes crying out to come in this department." So I said, "Give it to one of them then." You know, simple as that. But my journey started with Christ, started with a children's Bible, not ashamed to say that. It had pictures in and I understood it. And then I did the Alpha course, and I had to do it again a second time because I had so many questions, and I'm not a sort of bloke who pretend to be what I'm not. So I did the Alpha course twice because I wanted to get my head around it. And over the years, I've been involved in leading lots and lots of Alpha courses, which has been such a privilege. But that took me down to doing a 2-year course in the certificate in Christian discipleship with the Leicester Diocese, which was really interesting because I thought I can't do some sort of academic theological qualification when the other people on the course were like GPs, solicitors, barristers, people of that profession, and you got me, and I thought I can't do it. But again, to cut a very long story short, my church, parochial church council, the PCC, paid for my first year of study. Had they not, I'd have sacked it off because I thought I'm not good enough to do this. But I did 2 years theological study where I had to do assignments that were marked by university, which was really interesting. But I got through that. And then I did a year's training as an evangelist. So the Bishop of Leicester, in his infinite wisdom, licensed me in 2010. And coincidentally, 2010 was when I discovered Christian Vision for Men.
Wow.
And I've spoken for far too long, haven't I?
No, not at all. Because it's your story, but I wasn't going to interrupt that one. There's an awful lot in there. I am conscious of time. I maybe got 10 minutes, but I love how there's an awful lot I can recognize in parts of that, not the whole story. I understand PTSD. I had 18 months of therapy for that. But that's my story. But your story is one of redemption. It's one of God allowing only so much. You know, there's a misquoted scripture, isn't there? God doesn't give us more than we can handle, which is not true at all. God doesn't give us more than we can handle with Him, absolutely. But we will face trials and you know, traumas and stuff, and that's life. Even to how your buddy in the place, how he decided that, okay, this is where I'm going to end. I mean, even that's just on its own. That is a trauma that you have to process. Yeah. But I can certainly, identify certain parts of things. I can understand bits of this. But your story is your story, so you have definitely not spoken for too long, because it's a powerful story of God's redemption. It's a powerful story of a praying wife, the power of a praying wife, which is phenomenal. And I think I just wanted to touch on that briefly, because what I heard from you in that is you'd given up on you. God never gives up on us, but your wife didn't give up on you, and that is such a pivotal change in your life, I guess, is how I would verbalize it, because she went to this little 4-foot guy who was a man of God. And the thing is, if you are a man of God, then it doesn't matter if you wear socks and sandals, because you know what, you've got more strength in you because of that relationship, which is why he probably wouldn't have cared what you could do to him, because you're a soul that he wants to see meet Jesus.
Yeah. And again, I've discovered that when I left, every night when Sue put the girls to bed, the three of them would sit and pray for their daddy. Wow. And you know, that makes me quite emotional even now. But if it wasn't for Jesus, then Sue would have moved on by now. My girls would have forgotten me, and I'd have never have met my 5 amazing grandchildren. But what I want to stress is, and I say this to fellas, because I've had that amazing encounter with the risen Lord Jesus Christ. If somebody hasn't, that doesn't mean that He favours me more than you, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And and I'm not the finished article, far from it. What I do know is I'm not the man I should be, but I'm so grateful to Him that I'm not the man I was. And you know, we're all under construction, and I'm learning all the time. And one day when I stand before Him, because I will, if I can speak, then there's lots of questions I want to ask. And part of me thinks, well, it won't matter, so don't worry about it. But you know, we've not been immune to the awful things in life. So, you know, my life is not all wine and roses and everything's hunky dory and it's great, because it's 14 years now since my daughter lost one of her twins. right near the end of the pregnancy, and as a family, we had to go through that indescribable pain of that little one's. Her name was Lily. That little one's funeral, where my son-in-law carried that little white casket down the aisle of that church at the funeral, and that has scarred my heart. It has, and without Jesus in my life, then I don't know how I would have coped with that. But before that happened, I wouldn't have been here anyway. But, and I remember being really angry, and I stood in my back garden shouting at the sky. I was angry at God because this had happened. But 14 years later, my daughter has done so much positive work with other women who have lost children suddenly like that. So in all that horribleness, something good has come out of that even. So I'll give thanks for that.
I'll tell you one thing I just wanted to say, because we've got about 5 minutes before we need to finish, otherwise we won't fit this in. But the one thing that struck me was you talked about how you saw these guys at church. They're only there because they need a crutch. And I've shared this part of my life before, but when I was at school, there was a guy, I'm an atheist. Very clearly, I'm an atheist. There is no God. There can be no God. And he said, the problem with you, Andy, is you see God as a crutch. And I've shared this line before. And I said, yes, if you've got more crutches, I'll take them. Because him as my crutch is the only reason I can get through the day to day.
Yeah.
I don't think he knew how to put that, because his insult was great. Yeah, he is my crutch. He is the reason. My third leg. Have you got a fourth and a fifth? I'll take them, because I need his help in my life.
Absolutely. And I've tried to be in control of my own destiny. The best thing I ever did, and this probably puts it summarizes things nicely. The best thing I ever did was the day I made the decision to resign as managing director of the universe. That's the best decision I ever made.
If only we'd all do that. We all help God out, don't we? It's all right, God, we got this. We just do it our way. It'll all be good.
Yeah.
Yep, I've said those words publicly and to God. Paul, we're going to have to round this up. There's an awful lot in there. I think it goes without saying, if you're listening to this right now and you're thinking suicide's a good idea, please don't. You've heard Paul's story. Get in touch with CVM would be my first suggestion. Go and find a local church. It is open every single Sunday morning. If it's open once a month, forget it. Open every Sunday morning. Go and tell them. You will find men and women of God who are just longing to help you. So that's that feeling of isolation and being alone. It's a lie. It's not true. But the other thing I wanted to just really quickly conclude on is there is a spiritual battle, and that vision you had of the dark and the light. That is the battle that every single one of us is in from the moment we die to the moment, that from when we're born till we die. There is a spiritual battle for our lives. The devil is real. He wants to win.
Yeah.
Little secret, Jesus already won. But that tug of war, that goes on, doesn't it?
It does. And let's not lose sight of the fact we are in a scrap with the enemy.
Yeah.
It's a scrap. And he uses underhand tactics. He's dirty. He's not fair.
Cheats.
He'll have a go any way he can. So we're in a scrap. Let's not lose sight of that.
Yeah. Paul, thank you. How do people get hold of CVM? Is there a website people can get to?
Yeah, it's obviously the three W's, www.cvm.org.uk. It's all on there. But please, if anybody wants to contact me, please do so. Email, phone, it's all on the website. And I'll be more than happy to come and talk to somebody individually if that's the case. Whatever somebody needs, I'm your man. So I'm a resource to use. So please use me, because there are guys out there who are desperate to, and I know this, desperate to hear about their Saviour. And it's incumbent on me and you, Andy, to do it. So we will.
We will. We absolutely will. Paul, thank you. I've got to wrap it up. I could go on for hours. We have to wrap it up, otherwise we'll run out of time. But thank you for sharing your story. And again, if you're thinking, do you know what? I don't need to be here in this life anymore. Think again. It's a lie from the enemy who is real and wants you to give up. But people like Paul are testament to the fact that, you know what? Jesus already won the battle. So choose a light
Amen.
contact CVM or get involved with somebody. Paul, thank you so much for your time. I'm really grateful for that story.
Thank you.
It's been a blessing. Thank you.
Thanks very much.